Hey everyone, Doug Collins here, helping you to ace your next UX interview by answering some UX interview questions with you. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the classics, tell us about yourself. So when someone asks you to tell them about yourself in an interview, what they mean by that is they don't want to know what your favorite food is or where you went to high school. They want to know your story. They want to know why you're here. And in this case of a UX interview, they want to know what's your UX story. So what led you to UX? Why does that journey make you a good fit for this job? And really, interviews are all about a sales pitch. You're selling something, you're selling yourself, and having a brand is important. So think about what makes you unique. And that's the basis for the answer to this question. So, is it your experiences? Do you have unique experiences that you can share that would make you uniquely suited for this job? How about your outlook or your perspective? All of these can lead to some very interesting, engaging conversations that provide a memorable perspective and are going to make you stand out in the minds of your interviewers. Um, One thing to be careful about with this question, though, don't ramble. Be precise in the words that you use. And that's more tempting with some interview questions than others. This one in particular, I think, though, can sometimes lead to a stumbling block. So you want to have something ready when somebody asks you. So for me, when somebody asks me, tell me about yourself, I have a story, and it's the basis for my UX journey, and I'm very proud of telling it because it's was kind of a long journey. So when somebody asks me, tell me about yourself, I talk about, well, when I first got into the user experience world, it was in a very strange place. I was working at a call center for Nordstrom Bank. They're the banking division of Nordstrom, the big retail department stores at all the malls that you see. And at the time, I was living out of my car. I had followed a girl to California after only knowing her for about 6 months, and moved a little bit too quickly. And at the time, was able to change the job that I had over to the office in California. So I was working the same job in Colorado, working in California, chased this girl out there. And I'd kind of fallen into this job after not doing too well as a journalist. I had worked as a journalist and worked for the Broncos as an intern, helping out with their website and game day program. And I had done some coding stuff on my own and some design stuff on my own, but I just couldn't make it work as a journalist. So here I was on the call center for Nordstrom Bank. And if you don't know, credit is a really highly regulated industry. There are certain things you have to do, and there are certain things that you can't do with customer requests. Then there's some things that you have to do or say even. So we all needed a help system. Everybody that was on the phones needed some way to know what they were doing. And they had one, but the one that they had that was miserable. So they had this gigantic website that had every last little itty bitty piece of information you could ever want. Except that everything was just sort of randomly put across the site in sort of non-related places. And it was all alphabetized by topic. And if you didn't know the name of the topic that you were looking for, you didn't know, sometimes something could be related to a couple of different topics. There was no sort of cross-linking or anything like that. So it made it really difficult to try and help make this work. So I had some coding chops, and I decided, well, I've got a little bit of time between phone calls, not long, sometimes, a couple of minutes, sometimes just about 10 seconds. But I think I might be able to make something better. So in between phone calls, I started to use Notepad and Internet Explorer, because that was all that I had, to try and design a better system. Um, Over the course of time, I started adding different features, different ways to find things, different ways of linking things, different features to create like notes for accounts that we did quite often. There was about 4 or 5 different notes that we would make on the accounts. I just sort of kept building and progressing it, and eventually I started testing it with other people to see, okay, how does this work? Is this working well? Does this solve all the problems that we need? And getting feedback and sort of rebuilding that into our system. And over the course of time, a couple of years really of working on this, I proved that you could save about 34 seconds per phone call. And we had about 300 reps working on the phones at that point in time. Each one took somewhere around about 100 calls a day. Some took more, some took significantly more, some took less or significantly less. But when you averaged it all out and you looked at the total cost of what that meant, that 34 seconds per phone call, it meant that if we implemented this system, it could save Nordstrom Bank millions of dollars a year. And it was something that I was told in no uncertain terms to stop doing over and over and over again. But I believed in the project. I got such good feedback that I kept doing it, kept working on it, kept testing it with users, kept getting feedback, kept building new features and adding in new things. And it wasn't until the end of the process really that I found out what UX design was. And once I found out what it was, I was hooked. And I was entirely self-taught. I've always been entirely self-taught with UX. I've worked to build the system between phone calls, but I learned about UX and UX design studying and reading from my 8-year-old laptop at that point in time. After work, before work, I was working in Costa Mesa, and my girl that I was chasing lived down in San Diego County, and it meant that I had a lot of free time uh, because just going back and forth wasn't particularly effective use of my time. So I spent a lot of time learning before and after. And the more I learned what I was doing, the more hooked I became. And eventually, I was given a chance to pitch this system to the CEO. And I remember after pitching the system and presenting it to him, he stopped and he looked around the room and said, "Why aren't we doing this already?" And to me, that speaks to the value of user experience. And when you're able to put things into terms of not only dollars and cents, but the human factor and how it makes things easier for everyone involved, the answer to why you're doing UX is because it makes sense and should absolutely make sense. And in the case of our CEO at the time, I was able to present it in such a way that it made sense to him. And so he promoted me to being a software engineer and said, "Go out and do this, make this a reality." So I was charged with implementing that system company wide, not just for the credit call center representatives, but the collections, legal, marketing, et cetera, everywhere else that had a similar system. That's how I got my first big break in UX design. And since then, I've just been looking for the best opportunities that I can to use my skills to make the world a better and more user-friendly place. So that's my story. That's my answer to the "tell me about yourself" question. And a few things I want to point out there. It makes me memorable. How many people do you know uh, got into UX design that are self-taught? Probably quite a few. And maybe not the vast majority. Certainly, you probably know somebody that's in the UX world that was self-taught. But how many people do you know had to live out of their car and work on a system between phone calls and build and learn in that system? So it's building my personal brand, because for me, my personal brand is all about a personal drive to be better, doing things that go above and beyond, that make me a better worker, and make my employer more profitable and more user friendly. So it's a great way for me to show my brand. It's a great way for me to kind of stick out in their imagination and their minds. And it's a great story for people to remember me by. And it's all 100% true, but it's all in the way that I say it too. Okay, that's all that we have for today. If you like this video, please go ahead, like and subscribe. And of course, please feel free to leave a comment if you have any particular UX interview question you'd like to see me handle. I'll be putting out these UX interview questions on a pretty regular basis. You can find me on Twitter at DougCollinsUX, or you can go to my website, denveruxer.com, if you want to get in touch with me. Otherwise, that's all that we have. So whoever you are, wherever you might be, thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great rest of your day and an excellent user experience.